Okay, I think we can maybe start. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us to our AI Ready webinar. During the presentation, you can ask all your questions via the chat. Our experts are on the call. They will be able to answer them. And now let me introduce you to my colleague, Vadim, who will be presenting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Andréane. Thank you. And thank you, Andréane, for helping organize this amazing event. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I see that we have a good quorum of people here today. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to join us. Just a quick little confirmation. Everybody can see me, hear me okay? Audio is good? All right, awesome. All right, so without further ado, we'll get started. And really this campaign, just to give a little bit forward, working in data and data analytics and working with customers around, business intelligence, decision intelligence, and then the advent of OpenAI coming to the industry and really rocking this, this current landscape that around data and analytics. We were noticing that there are certain patterns that are starting to emerge amongst many of our customers. And really all the patterns pointed towards a scenario where the technology departments, the people that were driving the technology solutions within the organizations, were being bombarded with requests by the business to have the capabilities in order to start running, testing, evaluating AI capabilities within the organization. Either it's through generative AI, either it's through advanced forecasting, either it's through anomaly detection, security detection, whatever it may be. There's a huge amount of demand that was coming towards IT organizations. And so traditionally in our practice, we would focus a lot on the data side, focus primarily on business objectives and try to align the data strategy to business objectives. But now, given that we really don't know where AI is going to be in 12, 24, 36 months from now. So the whole initiative here today and what we're going to be presenting to you is how does IT take control of their environment, and in order to be prepared to start supporting AI initiatives from the business. So with that being said, let's jump in there. And once again, guys, there are some technical topics I'll be jumping into. We have there's a little bit too many people on the call to take the questions live. So please do not hesitate to type everything up in the chat. It actually makes for a good reference after the meeting, and all of this information, as well as the meeting, is being recorded and will be available to you afterwards. All right. In a brief introduction, my name is Vadim Schwartz. I run the data and analytics practice at ITI. All right, let's dive in there. So the first thing that I wanted to do is really lay the groundwork for this conversation. So I decided to open up a Copilot window and ask Copilot, hey, what does being AI ready really mean to most organizations? And obviously, the answer was a little bit larger than what you guys see here, but to summarize it, essentially came back, it needs to be prepared to incorporate AI into their business operations. And what's key also is understanding what steps needs to be taken in order to take the necessary advances so that AI platforms and so that AI services can be exposed to your organizational data. And when we look at projects, it's not all about technology. We know that. It's about people, process, it's about culture, it's about building out citizen data, it's about having trust in your data, getting people to get comfortable to make decisions using data. So obviously we can help, and our methodology for deploying takes into consideration the people, process, and culture. But for today's session, it's going to be a technical session, so we're going to be focusing on data and platform. But if you guys do have questions around process and people and how to get organizations on board to start looking at more advanced AI conversations, we can help you with that as well. All right, so let's move forward. So the key to being AI is ready, obviously, is all about data. It's all about making sure that your data is in a proper platform and ready to be consumed. So this means essentially data needs to be centralized, not necessarily all living in the same bubble or in the same lake house or something, but it needs to have a centralized or a federated approach towards management and operations so that we can guarantee quality of service, not only of the availability of our data, but the quality of the data that is being analyzed, right? Everybody knows the expression garbage in, garbage out. So quality is crucial. And of course, given that how the indexing and how these models work with our data, if they're not properly secured, if you don't have a proper governance play in place, you will be absolutely hindered on how to move forward. You will not be able to pass compliance, and you won't know who has access to what data. And then at the end, also, it's important to, obviously, today we're going to talk about integrating all your existing sources, but selecting a platform that's open for the new sources that'll be available, next week, next year, in the next few years. Some of them may be traditional applications, some of them may be microservices, some of them may be SaaS-based. You may be buying third-party data and ingesting it into your organization. There's a lot of different things when we talk about integration. So when we think about a customer's environment and we say, okay, are you AI ready? Really what we're looking at, and it's not rocket science, is how are you currently using data? How are decisions being made in your organization? If you're looking at the slide here, we have Salesforce, SAP, we have Jira, some people are using Power BI, but the organization is really making the decision and the reporting around using Excel. They either build Excel files from exports that they use across different silos, or a lot of the times what we see is, some people in the accounting and finance department, controller, compiling tons and tons of different reports into a single Excel spreadsheet so that, the business has end of month reports and stuff like that. So that's really not an ideal situation. What we want to be looking at and positioning you guys is where all of your data sources are being fed into this unified, structured, governed entity. This entity will have a centralized way of accessing for the user community. So as you notice, Excel is not necessarily consumed by the users. Power BI is an amazing tool for that, as far as just generating static reports, as far as generating self-service capabilities, where you can drill into the data. I don't want to talk too much about Power BI today. That's not the focus, but it's really becoming a very large, Swiss Army knife when it comes to decision intelligence and analytics and visualization in the organization. So, but once we have all of these things in place, then we can comfortably say that we are ready to start taking on AI projects. So in order to get an organization to a ready state, there's a couple of challenges that we have to acknowledge. There's a couple of things that we need to understand that, and we see it in large or small organizations. Obviously, here you're looking at an architecture that's a little bit, it's distributed. We have different zones. We have a raw zone, a refined zone, purpose, a computation zone. But at the end of it, as you notice, there's tons of ecosystems that we need to build and that we need to work around. And each ecosystem is a silo. And every single subsystem has their own technologies that are being used, or a different class of technologies that are being used. And don't forget, all your people need to understand, work with them. You need to hire accordingly to the decisions that you've made. And it becomes, you're kind of siloing not only your data assets, but you're also siloing somewhat your capabilities within the organization. And then it becomes more and more complex because vendors, they make changes to their software, and then you have a multi-vendor solution, which makes it very difficult to manage, to upgrade, to uplift, if you will. So really, when we're talking about AI projects, you don't want to be in this type of world. There's a great expression on Microsoft. I've seen in Microsoft slides this: I'm a chief data officer, not chief integration officer. And really, if you're really bogged down by integration for your AI project, you're not going to get far, and you're not going to get far quickly enough to adopt AI. The other problem that we see is that a lot of the times what happens is that different departments start to build out their own data lakes. And they don't necessarily call them data lakes, they call them repositories, or we have a place where we curate our data, so on. So what we notice is that these data lakes, they start exchanging data within them. You're copying data sets from one place to the other. And then the different departments are moving data in and out constantly from within these organizations because they're the owners, they're the butlers of this data, if you will. So they're constantly moving. And of course, at the organizational level, they're exchanging information nonstop. So this creates a plethora of conditions that are not optimal. One being most likely you have ETLs moving, cleaning, digesting data across these different silos, which makes things difficult to manage and maintain. But then you really don't know where data is. What is the freshest form of data? Did certain data that needs to adhere to compliance or security regulations is being moved around without somebody's knowledge? How is the data being moved around? Is it being copied in CSV files? Do we have an ETL moving? So it just becomes really difficult to manage. And this is something that another thing we have to move away from, because you'll never be able to get full control if you're living in this type of situation. Right? And we see this across the board, and you don't have to be a very large organization to fall into this particular scenario. The other thing that we see is that, traditional applications will all have their own languages. You'll use SQL, you'll be using Python, and those will require your data to be in certain formats in order to be able to work with it. But then you introduce AI applications, and then you need to adhere to those formats. So sometimes we have curated data that gets copied into multiple different formats so that it could be exposed to the proper services, either decision-making services or traditional analytic services or new AI-based services. And that's another thing where we're introducing tons of duplication. And once again, when we have these duplications, you have to think about the ETL, the process of copying the data, validating the data, deleting the data, destroying the data. It gets heavy. And we really want to avoid this type of scenario moving forward. So this is why we believe that Microsoft Fabric is an amazing platform, if not the best platform in the industry right now to support AI initiatives and also to build upon in order to support future AI initiatives. The first thing, honestly, it's a really, really comprehensive platform. All the services that you can imagine as far as bot services, cognitive services, your generative AI services are all built into the platform. And you can also integrate external third-party models or what needs be into the infrastructure seamlessly. So this is a huge, huge plus, and not many others can say the same. The entire platform now, Fabric, if you're used to the Microsoft traditional, let's say, Synapse Analytics platform, or just the Azure data processing platforms, were a combination of services that you had to stitch together. They were licensed differently. Now, moving forward, Fabric is a single SKU. It's offered through a SaaS service. It has Power BI, Azure Data Factory, data lake capabilities, all of it built into one SKU, if you will. So consuming it is very simple. And then most importantly, it gives you the ability to secure and govern in a unified platform. So we're going to get into governance, but security is key, and we're going to double click on that one throughout the presentation. The other thing that's important to notice is that this is not necessarily a data warehouse play. This is a lake-centric play. This is an open lakehouse platform, if you will. And it exposes immense capabilities. One capability to address some of the issues that we've spoken about, and I'll touch up on that later on, is one copy. Instead of having multiple copies of your data, why can't I expose a single data set to multiple services instead of copying this data set for the use of these services? So things like that become very, very interesting and simplify the solution significantly. Then, when we're looking at getting the solution into the hands of the users and making something with it and building it out, it has to be familiar and intuitive. And everybody is very familiar with Microsoft interface, the way the Microsoft technologies work. You may not be familiar with certain aspects or certain services within Fabric, but your users are enabled in typical Microsoft fashion. Documentation is amazing, very, very detailed. The knowledge base is readily available, and a big open community to help support. The other piece, which is very, very interesting and gets left behind, and this is something that I encourage everybody to truly stop and think about, is your white collar tools. most of the corporate data that gets created by users. Yes, there's application, our ERP system, so on. But there's a lot of data that's being generated by users, that's being shared by users. So how do I incorporate that data into my AI strategy? Non-structured data, and everybody thinks about, video and audio and so on, but no, files, PDFs, Word documents. Those things live and breathe and move around in your organization. They need to be secured, governed, and also exposed to analytics, either to help somebody do their job better or to get a unified view of how projects are moving forward, or being able to expose, your project data to large language models and be able to interact with the data natively. So all of those things become very important. And that's why an integration with your non-structured data generated by users is key. And we also need a platform that's able to not only, give you the visualization and explain what is going on, but allow you to take actions, to close doors, to open up doors, to enable pipelines, import third-party sources, and so forth. And then, of course, the platform is built to run AI applications and to run AI projects. So accelerated copilots, yes, we think about Microsoft and copilots, but there are other forms of copilots. Microsoft has a Copilot Studio. They have AI Studio as well that's exposed to Fabric. So you guys can be building your own copilots and defining your own prompts and defining your own prompt engineering to make things a lot simpler within your organization. Defining the users, defining the context into which the search should be done. All of that can be done quite easily with this platform. And then, it's really hot. Everybody's always asking, how do I use ChatGPT on my corporate data? How do I use it without modifying the base model? I don't want to train ChatGPT's model. I just wanted to use it on my data. This is a really quick way to get you there. And all these services, of course, are exposed. So if you guys, I just laid down a lot of information. If you guys have any questions, I encourage you to ask away at the chat, please. All right, let's move forward. So the pieces that I really want to talk to you about today with when it comes to Fabric, and Fabric has a lot of different services, and really it depends on your maturity scale, where you are. But I want to talk about the foundational services that we need. And what we're here presenting to you is our AI Ready service. It's a service offering. It's a turnkey solution. There's two sizes to it, small and medium, essentially. And I'll talk to you guys a little bit more about it. But the core of this service is really to take your corporate data, bring it into what I'll talk about is OneLake, which is the lakehouse associated with your Azure tenant. And we're going to talk about integrating Purview into our AI strategy in order to have proper governance, compliance, and security, and to operate, in a safe environment. So those are the two main pieces that I'll be addressing today. Okay. All right. So OneLake. What is OneLake? OneLake is essentially, everybody's familiar with Azure Data Lake Services. That's not necessarily OneLake. OneLake can connect to Azure Data Lake Services, but OneLake is a lakehouse that comes with that. As soon as you have an Azure tenant enabled, you have access to OneLake. So it's a SaaS model. Essentially, as soon as data gets ingested into OneLake, or not into OneLake because you don't necessarily copy data, and I'll get into that shortly. But as soon as data is controlled or managed through OneLake, indexing this data, looking for sensitivity labels, deploying lineage, doing PI scans and things like that becomes very, very simple. And integrating a compliance and governance layer into OneLake becomes realistic, and you don't have to go to multiple different sources in order to do it. OneLake unifies these capabilities for you. So let's dive into OneLake. So there's a couple of things in OneLake that I'd like to talk about. So first off, remember when I mentioned that different services will need different formats? Well, that's not true in OneLake. OneLake uses what we call a Delta Parquet format for all data that is written into OneLake. So all services, all replication of databases, everything will fall into what we call a Delta Parquet format, which is a standardized format across the industry. Everybody uses it. But the beauty now is that if you're running Spark jobs or SQL jobs, or if you want to expose Power BI to your data sets, you're all of these services are compatible with this data parquet format. And the Delta Parquet format provides you not only this use across services, but also capabilities where you don't have to necessarily create copies of data in order to expose to different services. So that's already immediately, as soon as you adopt OneLake, that problem gets fixed right off the bat. Then, obviously, we want to interact with external sources. So OneLake has built-in APIs for a lot of the Microsoft technologies, obviously. Databricks, Azure AI Studio. So you can work with your data, ingest your data this way through APIs. And of course, when we're looking at Fabric, and Fabric has Fabric ADF, Azure Data Factory, which comes with a plethora of predefined APIs for almost every modern application out there, commercially available out there. So that's very traditional, nothing new here. The new thing that I'd like to talk about is now Fabric has the capability of doing mirroring. So mirroring today supports a few workloads. This supports MongoDB. It supports Azure SQL Server, so it's not on-prem, it's in Azure, and it supports Snowflake. There's also one or two other ones that are supported. I believe Cognos DB is supported, and one or two others today. But for the calendar year, for this upcoming calendar year and forward, almost every traditional database, structured database structure that is available out there is in the roadmap to be supported. So what is database? So what is mirroring? Mirroring allows you to set up a unidirectional sync between your transactional database and OneLake. So instead of building an ETL, mirroring will use CDC, so change management technologies, in order to continuously refresh and synchronize the data within OneLake. So if you have an Azure SQL Server that's running in production, it's running for transactional workloads, we set up mirroring. As soon as changes are happening on the production workload, those changes are being refreshed and replicated in the OneLake environment. And there is no ETL to set up. So there's no pipeline to set up in order to do this. So now you can just, I don't want to say right click and enable, but it's a little bit of that. Walk through a little bit of a wizard, give the necessary credentials, and have this unidirectional synchronous copy in OneLake with no necessarily overhead maintaining pipelines or anything of that nature. Okay, so this is a huge, huge win, because how do I get my transactional data into my lakehouse? And that was, these are custom ETLs or custom pipelines that we have to build. Now, capabilities like this make it super simple to consume. The other big thing is what has also been announced and it's available now, is called shortcuts. So shortcuts, as you see, the first one I want to touch up on is Dataverse. So Dataverse is essentially your Power Platform. So if you guys are using Power Apps to, for robotic process automation, if you're generating data or if you're collecting data using Power Apps, all of that data is being held in Microsoft's Dataverse. So now by creating shortcuts, instead of copying the data into OneLake, shortcuts exposes the data to OneLake. So you don't have to maintain multiple copies of the data. And the same is true for Google, for your S3 buckets, or for your other Azure data lakes. So if you have an S3 bucket that has, your marketing collateral in it, if it has, maybe some of your archived files or project files that are being kept, and you want to expose that, you don't necessarily have to copy that data from Amazon into OneLake. You just set up a shortcut, and now that data is available to OneLake. And everything I mentioned before, and I'll get into it again, as far as the scanning, the indexing, the lineage, the access, all of that will be managed through OneLake, even though if the data is residing outside of Azure. Okay, and that's a really, really big thing. Once again, there are no pipelines to set up. There's no data to copy in order for this capability to work. So now if we look at it at a holistic way, we have a base lakehouse architecture that allows me to provision and to use all these different analytical and AI-based services without having to duplicate my data. I'm always using the same format. I'm able to reach out and grab data via APIs. I'm able to mirror and bring in my transactional data seamlessly. And I can expose all my other data assets, be it on Azure or elsewhere, without having to copy them over or maintain pipelines. So there's nothing else in the industry that can come close to providing us this type of flexibility today. So any questions, guys? I really encourage you guys to ask them over the chat. Just to let you know, I forgot to mention, we have 2 engineers that are working the chat board. So feel free to ask as technical a question as you like. We have the people online to help them respond. The other thing that becomes really interesting, and working in the industry for a bit, the concepts of data virtualization was very popular at a certain point. It's kind of being phased out. Data mesh is becoming very popular. And the point with data mesh is that we want to create a federated environment that allows the curators of the data, right? The IT department, the sales department, operations, marketing, to control the data once inside the lakehouse. And this is what Microsoft with OneLake is exposing through what we call domains. So we're able to set up these domains and say that, let's say, sales is responsible for IT and sales data. Marketing is responsible for ads and customers and so on. Now, once we set up these domains, we can go inside the domain and give permissions, not at the lakehouse level, but at the domain level to the different entities, the different groups within your organization, so that they can control what comes in and out of the data lake. But they can only control their own domains. And this essentially creates a true data mesh as a service environment. So you don't need to have a very complex architecture. You don't need to layer additional solutions on top or have like a really complex RBAC setup in order to make this happen. This is all built-in capabilities now. So the ability to give your users and empower your business users to move data in and out of your data lake so that they can know what's really fresh, what's not fresh, what's outdated, and giving them that type of control is a really big key in adoption, and making sure also that the quality of the people we're working with is optimal. Okay, so. And I'm kind of going through these a little bit quickly because I don't want to necessarily end at the minute, and give us an opportunity to ask some questions and maybe review some stuff if you guys are interested. The other piece is related to one copy. As I mentioned before, all the different services and all the data that is kept in OneLake is kept in this data parquet format. And what becomes true is that all of these services that you see will start communicating directly with this format and copying data if you want to create, either like a medallion structure or forth, will become a lot simpler because of this format. And obviously, as you guys know, there's a lot of other benefits to, I'm not sure if you know, but there's a lot of other benefits to keeping your data in this type of format. If you want to migrate, if you want to move over, if you want to, for some reason you want to go, you want to pick another data platform where there's a merger and acquisition happening, you are setting yourself up to be future-proof adopting this type of format. And that's also key. It's a little bit of thinking long-term, but it's definitely an important piece because you don't want to rebuild, or you don't want to rebuild the wheel at that point. All right. One security, and this is really, really fascinating because remember I mentioned you have mirroring, you have shortcuts, you have APIs, so you have all these different data sources that are now controlled through OneLake. And using one security allows you to have this really granular control that you could set up, at the row level, at the column level. You can set up masking based on role-based controls, security. But what's really cool is that this is also available as soon as you present your data through shortcuts or mirrors or APIs. That data, those policies that you set for security, will be followed throughout all those different data sources that you have, if those requests and the management comes through OneLake. So now think about scripting, think about application development, think about exposing your sources of data throughout different assets, different locations, different cloud providers, different applications. Do you want to create roles and controls across all of them, or do I present everything through one lake and then have a unified way of accessing all of my data assets? This is a huge play for and differentiator for when it comes to other solutions that are out there. Other solutions have very incredible security and governance capabilities within their own platform. As soon as you go out of their platform, things don't necessarily work the same anymore. If everything is being fed through one lake, if all your data assets are being fed through one lake, this capability is a godsend, if you will. So that's pretty much what I had around one lake, and now I want to dive into Purview. So we have about another 15-20 minutes. So around Purview, Purview is a product that's in constant evolution. I think it's been around formalized for like 2-3 years already. Capabilities are being added at a breakneck speed, if you will. Like Microsoft is really doing an incredible job with Purview because it does so much. So, and this is, and I'd like to put things into context. So when we talk about Purview for the sake of this AI readiness campaign, we're not talking about Purview data security nor risk and compliance. We're really talking about Purview data governance. So there are different aspects to Purview. A lot of people know Purview because of the Microsoft Office practice, and Purview is used to deploy labels and to scan files for sensitive information. And so a lot of Purview deployments are on the Office side we're using for the non-structured data, but Purview is an elegant solution for structured data as well, for metadata management, for governance, and for scanning and detection and alerting. It's a phenomenal platform, and it's fully integrated into the system, into Fabric. So let's dive into it a little bit. So obviously Purview can do a lot of different things, but in order to be AI ready, we believe that you need to have control. You need to be able to tag your data accordingly, scan your data accordingly, and have the necessarily built-in controls. So information protection capabilities within Microsoft with Purview will allow you to create what we call these sensitivity labels. These sensitivity labels can be deployed on your data in a metadata way, if you will, and essentially give you a foundation to start building out a governance program around your data. What is external, what is internal, what can be shared, what is executive level data, what is departmental data based on geographies, however you feel it needed to be. And at the same time, it also supports data loss prevention, DLP, capabilities, which allows us to scan all of your structured and non-structured data, of course, and look for social security numbers, credit cards, emails, whatever may be, whatever you want to search. And obviously you can build your own templates as to what you want to search and the type of actions you want to take. Today, most of the capabilities are through, as far as actions, there's alerting, but there are now more and more capabilities that are being introduced where you can eliminate access to data if the people are logging in, or if they're doing certain activities like copying data to sources that they shouldn't be. So not only being tagged, but also preventing from those operations of occurring. And then the other big thing that we really like around Purview and integration of Purview is the data hub within Fabric. So when you're in the Fabric interface, you can click on the data hub, and essentially you have within your data platform, you have a full compliance and regulatory capabilities for monitoring, management, and taking actions. So right here we see how data is being used, what are the applications that are using it, who are the users that are coming in, what type of data is being consumed, and then really most importantly, not most importantly, but very importantly, you want to understand how much of your data has been tagged, how much of your data is following your governance and your compliance requirements. So you want to get to a point where almost 100% of your data is tagged and within your control, so that you know When you're giving somebody permissions to work with your data, you know exactly the data sets and the level of security that they need in order to access the data, or vice versa. So great place to enforce compliance and enforce best practices for the organization. Okay. So once we have all your data centralized, once we have the necessary controls to index, to govern your data, to give access to your data, we've standardized on the formats that your data can use. Now you guys are ready to look at what type of business use cases AI can help you with. You run a large support department and bot services may be important to you? Do you run some kind of manufacturing and video indexing is important to you, or form recognition is important to you? You know, there's also these cognitive services around generative AI, open AI services, speech recognition services, all of those things. And of course, if you want to run machine learning models on the environment, all of that is also supported. And once again, all of these services will work with OneLake directly without necessarily having to have multiple copies of your data, and work with the same platform. Yeah. I don't want to dive in too deep into these services because the goal of the presentation is really not for that. But if you guys have questions, or if you want to learn more about any one of these, and I think that this slide may be a year old, so there may be some name changes that have happened. But if you do have questions about how AI can impact your organization and bring more value, feel free to give us a call. We'll most likely help. We'll be happy to help you with that. So really, in hindsight, Microsoft Fabric is a great unified platform to fit all of your AI needs. And it's a great way to get started because obviously being a SaaS platform, being a cloud-ready platform, there's no massive capital investment that needs to happen. You can start small and you can work your way up. And that's really where I'd like to say this is where we can come in and help you. So oh boy, this slide does not necessarily look the way I thought it would. I apologize for that. So our AI-ready platform approach, essentially, and once again, I apologize for this badly formatted slide. Not really sure what happened there. Falls into four major categories, four major steps. And once again, we deliver this as a turnkey approach. So it's in typical ITI fashion. We have a methodology that we work in agile sprints. We want to make sure that we can deliver value within a sprint. And this is what our AI-ready sprint would look like. The first step that we do is we collect all the organizational data and we bring them in under OneLake in a centralized way. We expose them into OneLake. At this point, we're not necessarily doing any type of transformation or advanced ETL work. We just want to bring and consolidate all your data assets under OneLake in a raw format if needed, so that everything can be accessed in a centralized place, and so that we can move on to step two, which is start working on how people are going to be accessing the data. What kind of role-based controls are we going to be putting into place? And so then we move forward with governance. And essentially, we put purview in place into your tenant. We activate it. We do an initial scan for the data. We try to see if some data may be already labeled through other mechanisms. Those labels will be caught and picked up. Some data, we will also start looking at implementing sensitivity labels, and we'll help you define an approach where we can define maybe a handful of labels that we would start placing on your data to give us more visibility and start building into a more mature data governance play. And then lastly, when you combine all of these things, essentially what ends up happening is that we work directly with your teams to build this environment up, what we call an MVP, minimum viable product. So you have the base of a full production environment at your fingertips where all your data has been unified. You have security controls around access permissions, and you have a governance platform that's already built a base for you to work on and establish more stringent requirements if need be. Either they may be governmental, they may be industry-based, or they may just be corporate-based requirements. So, and I have no doubts that Purview can satisfy all of those needs. And what we leave you with at the end is an environment that gives you a lot more trust and moving forward. Really, our goal is, like it says here, our goal is to empower you, equipping you with the skills and knowledge to become self-sufficient and confidently navigate your data and AI platform. We've been doing this for a long time. We have a lot of successful customers. The AI Ready approach, this is a new service for us. When I say new, it's about 2 months old. We already have 4 or 5 customers that we're moving forward with. And all of this starts, and this is what I'd like to also present to you guys, is, it doesn't want to change, is we put together, so we said, listen, sometimes this may be going full in with an AI Ready initiative, maybe a little bit too much for customers. They want to first understand where to start, how to start. Maybe they need to make a business case to upper management. Maybe they need a little bit more reassurance that this project can become feasible within their organization. And for this reason, we've put together and automated what we call an AI readiness assessment. So using online forms, we send you a combination of forms that some are technical, some are business, some are more vision and strategy around where does your company want to go, how do they want to be using data. Then we ask questions, how is data currently being used? What is the effort to generate your KPIs? What are the different sources for KPIs? And then we have technical questions that we ask. And then once all of that information has been filled out, we compile that and we present it back to you in four digestible pieces. One, we'll present to you what we've discovered. So all the different data assets. We do this, the format that comes back to you is in PowerPoint. I mean, we provide in any format, PDF or Word if you like. But essentially, we'll give you a diagram of your current data assets and what is being used. We also give you an assessment of as far as where you are on the maturity scale. And we don't necessarily try to tag a company as a whole into the maturity model, because different departments we realize will have different maturity levels. So we try to identify that. And that will help us define what are the low-hanging fruits. That will help us understand what departments need to be brought up quicker in order to be aligned or to be at the same level as others. Then we obviously provide you with a recommended architecture and a recommended approach. We've also been able to identify and triage use cases. I shouldn't say triage, prioritize use cases that are identified as low-hanging fruit that we can go out and build this MVP using to build the MVP, the pilot, if you will, the production pilot. And then we also, given our partnership with Microsoft, we're a premier partner. Forgive me, I forget all the different acronyms that we hold with Microsoft, but we also we have one that is somewhat rigorous to attain, if you will. We have the analytics on Azure, and we had to go through a series of audits that evaluated how we assess projects, how we deliver projects, our knowledge transfer with customers, the customer satisfaction. So now that we have this specialization, it's not a certification, it's a specialization, we're able to help fund your projects with the help of Microsoft. So as part of this deliverable, we also let you find out if you qualify for funding from Microsoft to help put your project and make it reality. So with that being said, we have a little, so if you're interested in this workshop, in this assessment, send an info to info@iti.ca. You can do it right now. Just say, I'm interested in somebody contacting me. And if you guys do it within the next 24 hours, there are some free t-shirts and some free Starbucks gift cards. So hopefully you guys will take us up on that. Once again, this AI assessment is very frictionless, doesn't involve too much time on your end. But at the end, it will give you an idea of what the project will look like, what the cost of the project will be, what will be our recommendations, and if we can help get funding from this project from Microsoft. So with that being said, we believe that this is a next-gen service. We believe that this is something that will help you go from an inception, an idea of this is where I need to bring my organization. We'll help you lay down the foundation. We help integrate all the different pieces so that the organization can move forward and innovate. Because ultimately, AI is all about innovation, optimization, and being able to do way more with less. And nobody knows how to do that better than the people within your organization that work every day. So our goal is to really enable them and give them the necessary tools and give you the necessary tools in order to start innovating and start looking how AI can reshape your business. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for your time. So any questions? I haven't seen the chat, so just really curious if if there's a lot of people asking questions on the chat. All right, great. Well, if there's any more questions directly for me, we're open. I think this meeting is open for another 10 minutes. So let me know if we can help. And also let us know if this was worth your time and if this is something that you guys are would like to talk about more in depth at your own convenience within your own locations. Right. Thank you very much, guys. The chat will stay open, by the way. Cheers.